But it was not at all the way I would have imagined or have imagined a demonstration or any of this kind of thing to be like. Everybody's you're walking on the street, and it's like you are suddenly with a million old friends. It was like a family reunion. A strange feeling of, and there wasn't one moment that was phony at all about it. I had people step on my foot and say, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, excuse me." I had a man standing in front of me when there was a big thing going on who says, "Can you see now?" And one of the great moments when we walked through the grove of trees and we start to walk along the street. I met a lot of old friends, and what really intrigued me was the number of people who didn't come. I will not mention that, but I sure was amazed by the absence of many people who I'd heard do a lot of talking prior to this moment, and they just weren't there. And a lot of people who never said a word are there. That's what really was very intriguing. You know, you never can tell who the people are in any world. I don't care what world it is, a football game, whether you're playing cards, whether you need money. You sure can't tell who it's going to be, who's going to come across. Let me tell you that. Any old GI will tell you that story, that there are a lot of awful tough commandos in basic training. There are a lot of guys that can go up those fences like mad, and there are a lot of men who can shout commands and all that. It's an interesting thing who it is who comes across when the real stuff is flying in the air. It really is intriguing. Well, we're walking along. You never can tell them either. Don't think for a minute you know who it would be. You do not know. I'm sorry, you don't. You don't know who your friends are. You don't know who your enemies are. But we're walking along the street, and everybody's together. And one more thing has to be pointed out. A man told me just when we were walking, and he was a Negro, by the way, and an old friend of mine. He says, you know, he says, I wish my cousin who lives in Paris could see this, could be part of this. He would never understand it, though. He says, this is a purely American thing. He says, the headlines, he says, you know, you read a headline about another country, you don't understand it because you're not Vietnamese, you know. You just don't know. You just don't know what is happening in Belgium because you're not Belgian, you know. It's just very difficult to know. And it is very difficult for a European to understand this. Really, I'm sure it is. And so we're walking along, and everybody's sort of standing along the sidelines waving. There are thousands and thousands of white people and colored people. Everybody's just standing there. Guys in offices are cheering out and waving. Nobody reported on this. That all along the line of march, guys are standing in offices waving. And I want to go on record as saying beforehand, during the entire day, I did not hear one word that I could construe as being the kind of word that you would hear in demonstrations. I did not see one moment that I could call a moment that gave me one even instant feeling of imminent rabble-rousing or any of this stuff. It was just an amazing attitude towards everything. And you know, I hate to use such words as love. These are ridiculous, meaningless words. But there was a feeling of humanity in the air, like we're all in something together. And that's exactly what happened. Even the guys who, I'm sure there must have been some guys in the offices and that, who felt the opposite way and suddenly realized how idiotic they were. You know, it was just a strange moment. And we walked along through this crowd, and everybody's standing there waving and so on. And we finally got, it was funny when we started the march, you never saw a more disorganized messing around, shuffling. And we got to the place where, it wasn't a parade, you know. I'm sure it's going to sound like a parade, you know, but it wasn't a parade. Nobody was hollering, "Workers unite!" Nobody's yelling, nothing. Everybody's sort of walking along, the sun is coming down, everybody's cheering, waving. And it was as though everybody knew, you know, that, and also there was a vague feeling of embarrassment in the air. It's just a vague feeling that you know, it was like somebody has laid in a stock of all kinds of stuff. He's going to yell at his friend, and he's going to yell, he's going to holler, and he gets there, and you know, it's all goes out the window. Everybody's sort of embarrassed, and so we're walking along. We get to the park where the Lincoln Memorial is. Incidentally, I once again, it reaffirms in my mind one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been in is Washington. I keep seeing this as a beautiful city, and It's even prettier than it used to be. I went to school for a while near there and used to spend weekends in Washington. It's changed a great deal. And we're coming through, and the sun is coming down through the trees, and millions of people are now gathering. And I don't know how they could estimate the number of people who are there. I just don't understand how they come up with these nice, neat, round estimates. Again, this is the reporter at work. He's sitting up there, you know, on the Washington Monument writing down, and I'm sure we're going to take some guy's attitude or his quick decision on who it is. And no doubt it's going to be the most authoritative newspaper's version of who's, you know, of how many guesses. There would be no way to estimate it. I have no idea how they ever came across estimating, because buses were coming in from all directions, everywhere. People were everywhere, and it was just like a great big round, just a sort of a big cloud. It was about as difficult as to tell how big a cloud is, or how many drops are in this cloud. Just sort of a big thing, and we walked through, and then the push started to get rough. And up there on the Washington, or the Lincoln Memorial, the crowd was gathered, and we pushed down into the crowd. And each place, you see, each delegation, if you can call it that, had a little place where it was supposed to be. Of course, it wasn't there. That went out the window with the cloud. And everybody's trying to get it, and they're walking around with their little signs and stuff. And suddenly, through the crowd, is this little tiny band of people coming with a little sign that said Mississippi. That was really a moment. I'll tell you, that was a moment. And everybody is hollering at them and talking, and they're laughing and hollering. It was kind of like a joke, too. It was kind of funny. And they're laughing and they're talking. And incidentally, I must go on record as saying, too, in that Mississippi group, there were more than just a few white people. That should be pointed out. And they're laughing, and everybody's laughing. They got their little sign that said Mississippi, and people are hitting them on the back when they walk through. They'd come all the way up on some crummy old bus, you know, or something. So they're there, and they're standing around there. Well, in the middle of it all, it's the greatest crowd I've ever been in my life. I'll tell you, I just never... it's a much greater crowd than you ever see at a ball game, which is supposed to be a fun thing, you know. Much greater, much more, much different thing. If you think you know about crowds, you don't know about it unless you've been in this one. In fact, a lady said to me, a colored lady was standing next to me. We were talking for an hour about this, and she says, you know, she says, she says, you can't tell the folks, you just cannot tell them how it was. I don't know how I'm going to tell them how it was at home, because you can't tell them how it was unless you were here. And then if you were here, you don't have to be told, you know? And that's exactly the truth. And you know, she said one great line. She says, you know, I think even Satan was moved today. What a line! I could see Satan feeling very, very embarrassed about all the rottenness he's been doing for years. You know, I'm sitting there, oh boy, I'm a rotten person. Well, we're all standing around in this great crowd, and it's going to sound like I invented this. Please listen carefully. This is exactly what happened. There was a man standing back of me that had a big white Panama hat on, and he, like so many of the demonstrators, it was obvious that this was a very big moment for him, and he was all dressed up. So many of them were almost all the people. Did you know that? That's an interesting thing. That our delegation was told to wear a jacket, was told to wear a tie, white shirt, and I mean, because this is a thing we're going to that's very important. And so everybody was all dressed up. It was funny to see, as we came into Washington, all the guys putting their jackets on. and it's hot. Oh, boy, was it hot on the bus. Putting their ties on, you know, trying to straighten up their collar and everything else. Because, you know, we're going to think. Somebody said it was like going to church with 200,000 people. That's really what it was like. Well, standing back of me was a man, great guy. And he was sort of a little short, stout man, sweating like mad. And he had rimless glasses. And his rimless glasses were all clouded up because he was sweating, and everybody was pushing him, and he had his little signs, and the sign said, NAACP Boston branch. And he's holding up this thing. You know, it's a long way from Boston, believe me, to Washington in a bus. So he's holding that sign up there, and then Marian Anderson started to sing the StarSpangled Banner. And the push was so fantastic you could see nothing except those great white columns of the Lincoln Memorial standing over you. And back of you, all the way in the distance, you could see the Washington Monument standing up and that long pond. You saw that picture in the paper today? Well, I want to tell you, that picture does not even come close to even approximating what it was really like. How beautiful. That sky was fantastic. The clouds were white. And that great, beautiful reflection of the Washington Monument laying across that water, and all those people sitting there with their clothes on, all dressed up, ladies with flowered hats and everybody else, and the kids all shined, everybody sitting, and it was just a moment where everybody's like all dressed up and everything was working fine. The trees were fine, the breeze was blowing, and once in a while a great big airplane would come across going to the Washington airport there, and he'd have his flaps down, and it was just like somehow everything was there. It was all right. Well, this little fat man standing back of me, sweating profusely, and he's holding up his sign, and Marian Anderson started to sing the Star-Spangled Banner. And it was, it's the usual kind of Star-Spangled Banner where it's through a PA system, and we're so far away we could hardly hear, and she's singing. You couldn't even distinguish the words, but it was the Star-Spangled Banner. Everybody's standing there. And suddenly a lady about, maybe 5 or 6 feet away, a lady with a big red colored hat on with big white flowers, the official kind of lady, you know what I mean? By the club lady who's always organizing. Say, this is a very club lady type. And she's a big colored lady, and she starts to say, well, the Brooklyn Core representatives, please assemble over here. Please get over here. Brooklyn Core representatives. And she's hollering in the middle of the Star-Spangled Banner. Well, the guy behind me says, Madam, and she looks at him, what? He says, they're singing the Star-Spangled Banner. We usually are quiet during the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner. Please. They're singing the Star-Spangled Banner. Well, she sat, just a funny look on her face for a minute, and she turns. Of course, the real organizer is not ever put off by anything so trivial as feelings or emotions. Well, she looked at him for a moment, and she turned, and he stood there sweating with his hat off, and they're singing the Star-Spangled Banner. I thought for a minute, what a fantastic moment. And don't anyone call up and say, Uncle Tom. Stop it, man. Oh, you know not whereof you speak. Well, we were standing down that crowd, and it was just hot and sweating, and then they began to bring on one entertainer after the other. Well, this was the entertainment before the real thing. And in the middle of it all, they brought our delegation. Somebody decided to bring our delegation up, and they pulled our delegation around and brought it up to the front through the ropes somehow, because every place had its own place to be, and they found that we were in our wrong place. We were between the plumbers and the concrete workers and a Catholic local from Baltimore. I don't know how we got there. So we wound up in the right place, and we're standing there, and suddenly I got a new perspective on it, because I'm looking at it from a very different direction.